Real Hi-Fi Help. Here to help you today with a very important but not really appreciated part of the hi-fi system. It's the thing that we all take for granted, most of us. And it's these brackets, connectors, jumpers, whatever they're called. Let me just show you a picture of that. We've got an amplifier here, and we've also got speaker terminals here, as you can see. And these metal things, these brackets, they are usually quite horrible, and they create usually a very negative effect on our sound. So I suggest replacing them with something decent. You don't have to go for the best. You can actually also ruin the sound by putting on some connectors that are too good, not fitting for the speaker that you have. We also have connectors, jumpers, brackets, whatever you call them, on, for example, an amplifier on the back here. And again, replacing that with some decent or high quality part will make the sound usually a lot better. But again, if you put something that's too good on that piece of equipment that you have, that's several classes above that equipment, it can reveal too much. So you have to be careful with that. So you can make a fix here that's pretty cheap and is going to sound a lot better than the standard connectors that you deal with. So let's get into it. So normal brackets and their sound, and I'm talking about low budget to mid-class, normal mid-class equipment. Usually the sound is unstable, fuzzy, metallic, hard, two-dimensional, suppressed in sound. It's just not very pleasant to listen to. It's very restrictive, and it just almost punches you in the face when you try to turn up to a decent volume. So that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why you don't want this thing in your system. So you can actually do this. You don't necessarily have to make your own connector. Um, you can also just buy wire or have two single wire speaker cables here, which I will show you to do in another video. But this is a liability. These cheap metal brackets, they usually make the sound unbearable. And so yeah. Let me just get a bit deeper into the subject. So when you replace a bracket, very cheap bracket, and with something like a connector, usually you get deeper into the sound. It's more evolved. It just feels as if it has a natural kind of flow. And if you get a connector instead of a bracket with your speaker, that is an indicator that your speaker usually is in a decent class where you're getting some decent sound. But when you're dealing with this, for example, these very low quality speakers, let's just say B&W, Audio Victor, whatever brand, and then it's maybe 30 years old and it's the lowest model that they have. They usually have these cheap connectors, and it can totally ruin the sound. So get rid of that. Put something decent on it, and you can experiment with a couple of different ones. And as I wrote here, in step 3, most equipment mentioned in the first part here, low budget to normal mid-class equipment, I would say it only has a rating of 1 to 3 out of 10 in regards to quality. So that kind of tells you what's happening with the sound. So and my opinion is that when you then go to most bottom mid class equipment to normal top class equipment, speakers, amplifiers, things like that, they're still only using something like a rating of 3 to 5 on a 10 scale. So it can get a lot better, and it's usually only when you get like some of the best equipment in the world that they put some really, really good connectors there. So something to look out for, because I know a lot of people they feel that the sound could be more natural, it could be more voluptuous. You could have a more um, clear and also more smooth, evolved sound, and this is definitely going to help with that. But we also have to be real, people, because one thing in regards to testing plugs, cables, and all of these things is that they aren't going to do a hell of a lot to your system when you have a system that's down there in quality. If you have a low budget system and uh, you know everything didn't really cost that much, and it's the lowest of the low class equipment, and it's really really old, and it's maybe 15, 20, 30 years old. Don't expect to have equipment like that and be able to hear something like a cable change, or change of plugs, or change of connectors. Sometimes you can actually hear a difference, and other times it can actually be quite a big difference. But I would say that, having tested several thousands of systems, I would say that you get kind of a mixed bag of reactions dealing with these type of things with crap equipment. So pardon my language, but that is the truth. The better the system that you have, and the better that it's set up, the more it reacts to small changes, just like the one that I'm mentioning. So it's just to bring that to people's attention, because this channel is about helping the hi-fi community as a whole. And I know that in regards to hi-fi, it is a very broad subject, going in a lot of different directions. So a lot of things, a lot of variables affect the overall sound. So it has to be mentioned, okay? So just because you're not getting a difference, don't get discouraged by that, okay? There's always some kind of explanation, and it's always very different from one system owner to another. So just to clear that up. So let's just get on with this. Step 5, the normal low budget to normal mid-class speaker. What I would do is then create my own cable, and that would be by using CMC Gold banana plugs and Summer Cable SC Blue bi-wire, or something similar like that. The reason why I'm mentioning this is not because I'm trying to sponsor this thing here, but I have listened to most plugs and most cables, and there are a few cables and a few plugs that make a big difference. But I would have to say that generally, and then we're talking generally in regards to cables and plugs that cost a normal amount of money, like a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand dollars. I would say that many of those aren't really that good, and you get really a mixed feeling about what's going on. And so this is one of the few things that I found that actually was pretty cheap. And what I would do was I would go on eBay, find these cheap CMC Gold banana plugs. I think it was like 10 plugs for like $10 or something like that, something crazy cheap like that, or maybe even $20, I don't know. And actually pretty good sounding terminals. Most banana plugs and spade plugs that are cheap sound cheap. They're just not very nice to listen to. You just get tired of listening to them and just want to turn off your equipment. But this is the one exception that I found where you actually can get something that's cheap but give you something that's close to a good mid-level performance, and for that amount of money, that's just ridiculous. So I highly suggest trying this and not finding something that's similar to that in the same price category, because you're most likely not going to find something this good in this price class. So CMC Gold banana plugs and Summer Cable SC Blue bi-wire, which is a speaker cable. You can use those to create your own connectors. Uh, and people have to also understand this, that the length of the connector also changes the sound a bit. So if you have a very short connector, you are going to get a very fast, a very responsive sound, but also a very unsettled sound with a bit too much attack. So what I would do was create something that was 25 centimeters in length, or maybe even half a meter per connector. So it's just to give you that advice, because that's very valuable. Okay, you can also put something like a meter long connector on, but then I think as soon as we're getting into that, a meter long connector, then you have to deal with lag in sound, it being too mushy and unclear. And so I'd suggest going for something that's perhaps 25 centimeters in length, or maybe even 50 centimeters to smooth out the sound. But I'll leave that up to you. And I especially also chose these CMC Go Banana plugs because you can screw them. You don't have to solder the cable on. That's also another plus. So very good for the price. Try and look for this. You could of course take some other cable. I chose this cable because I think it's very neutral, very honest, very responsive. And yeah, it could be that this cable isn't really something that you would like. Maybe you would like something that's a bit more warm ish in sound. Could be that you're going for something that's perhaps like a Carter sound, which is typically a lot more smooth and warm. And yeah, you can also try and do that, or something else, whatever. And I just want to say, I suggest using what I did, or something a lot better. More expensive usually means better, but sometimes it actually creates the opposite effect. So let me just explain that. If you have a system, let's just say it's a rating of 5 out of 10. No, let's say 2 out of 10, just to give to make a point. So it's not really a good system. It's only a 2 out of a 10. Do you really want to put cables and plugs on it that is, a 10 out of a 10? First of all, it's going to cost you a lot of money, which is not going to be used very wisely, because you're dealing with a 2 out of a 10 system, and that's, it's just not going to be very responsive. And even if you do get a big effect from this, usually it's not that positive. So you have to stay realistic. If you have a 2 out of a 10 system, I would put something like perhaps like a 5 or a 6 or a 7 maybe on that in regards to quality out of 10, because then you're lifting the quality up. But if you're lifting it too much up and you're using a 10 out of 10, you're gonna create too much sound going through the equipment. It's going to be usually too analytical, and then the speaker that you have, or the amplifier, whatever, it just won't be able to play together with that type of sound. So you have to be realistic about it, and that's why I chose this example, because it pretty much goes with most speakers. Yeah. And I also want to say that, as you can see in this 7th point here, one of the many reasons why a lot of people struggle with their system and testing new equipment is because of things like this, things that don't get mentioned. Metal brackets, connectors, jumpers. We take it for granted that when we buy a decent piece of equipment, that this is, it's been taken care of. Yeah, it's been taken care of. There is a connection, but there isn't a good connection presenting the speaker from its best side. So often when dealing with a normal piece of equipment, you can actually get quite a bit of extra performance out of it just by changing this little small thing. So I'll just go up to the picture again to show you what it is that I'm talking about. It's this here. You can see the speaker connectors, and I've got the brackets here. There's also something up there, not really sure what that is. And also here, metal brackets. Usually when it's a thick piece of metal, it usually translates into it just being able to deliver okay sound. I mean, there are exceptions to this rule where you get thick pieces of metal slabs either in copper or silver, and sometimes, a very few amount of times, especially when you're dealing with expensive equipment, it can actually sometimes sound good. So but I'm going with the generality here, just to give you guys an understanding of what's going on. Okay, so generally, if you buy a piece of cheap equipment and you've got these brackets on, replace those brackets. Okay, those are not contributing to the overall goodness of what's happening in your setup. So try and get rid of that. And as an example here, the Macintosh amplifiers, integrated amplifiers, if you want that thin, hi-fi-ish, gray-ish sound, fine, then use the brackets. But if you want a more warm, voluptuous, nice, comfortable sound where it releases the energy towards you and you can like lay back and enjoy it more, I suggest that you put in this case here, a good RCA cable on it. And it could be, for example, if I had an amplifier like this, it is a bit warmish sounding. What I would do is then I would probably put something like a low class Card-S cable, or maybe even an AutoQuest or whatever. Doesn't have to be expensive, but just going over to cable instead of these brackets, that in itself will create an effect. And if you can't hear this effect, that is okay. Okay, that it could be that there is a reason for that, and I'm not going to cover that with this video. I'm going to make a series of videos covering all the different aspects of sound. So perhaps you can, in one of those videos, find out what it is that you can take to yourself and improve on your system. So I hope this helps, and peace out.